Everyone thinks they know Caitlin Clark, the logo threes, the deep pull-ups that send arenas into a frenzy. But what if I told you that's not her greatest weapon? Larry Bird, a legend who hands out praise to almost no one, once sat her down and gave advice so brutally honest it didn't just change her game. It rewired the way she sees every possession, every defense, every rival. This wasn't about shots or skill. It was about strategy, vision, and the dark art of basketball, the kind of insight that turns a rookie into a chess master on the court. What Bird saw in Clark was rare, decades in the making brilliance, and what he told her didn't just save her season, it may have saved the entire league. Small-town legends. To understand why Larry Bird's words carried the kind of weight that could fundamentally alter a player's approach to the game, you have to understand the geography of greatness that connects these two people in ways that go far beyond basketball. Both Bird and Clark are products of the hardwood heartland. Bird grew up in French Lick, Indiana, a town so small.
Larry Bird. In a town of less than 2,000 people, Larry's legend stands strong.
That the most exciting thing happening on any given Friday night was whatever Larry was doing on the court at Springs Valley High School. Clark grew up in West Des Moines, Iowa, another Midwest outpost where basketball was not just a sport, but a language spoken fluently by everyone in the community. Both came from places where nobody expected greatness to emerge. Now both arrived on the national stage carrying the kind of chip on their shoulder that only comes from spending your formative years being told that the real talent lives somewhere else, in bigger cities with bigger programs and bigger spotlights. But the connection goes deeper than small-town roots and Midwestern grit. When Bird entered the NBA in 1979, the league was, to put it bluntly, struggling to survive. Ratings were down, arenas were half empty. The casual fan had tuned out entirely. The NBA was so desperate for relevance that finals games were being broadcast on tape delay, aired late at night after the local news because networks did not believe enough people cared to watch them live. Bird did not just play basketball during that era, he sold the game. His rivalry with Magic Johnson is widely credited with saving the NBA from financial collapse and transforming it into the global entertainment empire it became in the decades that followed. Fast forward to 2024 and 2025, and the WNBA was sitting in an eerily similar position. The league had spent decades fighting for attention, respect, and financial viability. It had loyal fans but limited mainstream reach. Arenas were often half full. Television deals were modest. The casual sports fan had never bothered to tune in. Then Caitlin Clark arrived and the entire equation changed overnight. The Caitlin Clark effect is not just a marketing term invented by a creative department. It is a statistical anomaly with real measurable consequences. When she missed time in early 2025 with a minor injury, WNBA ratings did not just dip.
She looked like she was definitely in some pain there. Missed 4 games with that groin injury.
Once they cratered by 55%. That single number tells you everything you need to know about how dependent the league's commercial future had become on one 22-year-old point guard from Iowa. Larry Bird saw this. He recognized it immediately because he had lived it. He understood the burden of the savior, the weight of knowing that an entire professional sports league is riding on your shoulders whether you ask for that responsibility or not. Bird was the last person to carry a franchise on his back from day one, while simultaneously being the target of every veteran in the league who resented the attention, the media coverage, and the uncomfortable truth that a rookie was the reason their paychecks were about to get bigger. When Bird sat down with Clark, he did not talk about her jumper. Because he did not break down film or diagram plays. He talked to her about the target on her back, and what he said next changed everything. The silent assassin. According to league insiders and interviews with people close to both Larry Bird and Caitlin Clark, the message that reshaped Clark's approach to the game centered on something deceptively simple, what Bird called the silence of the greats. Early in her WNBA career, Clark was doing what most rookies do when thrown into a spotlight this intense, reacting. She reacted to physical play, to officiating, to media narratives, and to the constant scrutiny that followed her every move. One of the most talked about moments came in June 2024, when a hard foul from Chennedy Carter during a game against the Chicago Sky went viral.
There's Carter.
That extra chance for Chicago, and they take advantage. There is no space, and she comes up gimping.
By igniting debates across sports media about how rookies, especially high-profile ones, are treated in the league. Clark's visible frustration in moments like that reflected the pressure she was under, but it also showed how much energy she was spending outside of the game itself. Bird saw that as the real problem. Not her skill, not her toughness, but her focus. His philosophy wasn't about responding better, it was about not responding at all. Drawing from his own experience in the brutally competitive 1980s NBA, Bird understood that emotional reactions often fuel opponents more than they help the player. During the height of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry, Bird faced relentless pressure from players like Magic Johnson, who brought charisma and flair, while Bird himself operated with a colder, more methodical edge. He didn't need to win the crowd, he won the game. And that distinction became the foundation of his advice to Clark. The message, as relayed by those familiar with their conversations, was direct. Stop giving energy to anything that doesn't help you win. Bird reportedly told her that the moment she argues with referees, reacts to trash talk, or shows frustration after a hard foul, she's playing into the hands of her opponents. In a league where physical defense and psychological tactics are part of the game, those reactions become opportunities for others to disrupt rhythm and confidence. Instead, he urged her to shift all of that energy inward, into execution, into control, into performance. There were signs of this shift as the 2024 season progressed. Clark began to show more restraint in high-contact situations. Rather than immediately turning to officials after missed calls, she often sprinted back on defense or reset the offense. Her body language changed, less visible frustration, more composure. Statistically, this correlated with improvements in efficiency. Her turnovers decreased over stretches of the season, and her decision-making in late-game situations became more measured. She still played with intensity, but it was channeled more precisely. By the time the 2025 season and postseason approached, that evolution was even more noticeable. Clark wasn't just avoiding reactions, she was controlling the emotional tone of the game. Opponents who tried to provoke her were often met with silence and execution.
Led by one of the best rookie seasons in league history by Caitlin Clark, a strong second season from former #1 overall pick Aaliyah Boston.
A hard foul might be followed not by confrontation, but by a calculated offensive possession on the other end. A missed call no longer lingered into the next play. The focus stayed intact. This approach also influenced how she handled the broader media landscape. As one of the most talked about athletes in the WNBA, Clark faced constant analysis, criticism, and praise. Bird's advice extended beyond the court. Don't chase narratives, don't respond to every headline, don't try to win approval. Let performance speak. Over time, Clark appeared to adopt that mindset, becoming more measured in interviews and less reactive to external noise. What Bird recognized early, and what Clark gradually embraced, was that greatness at the highest level isn't just about talent, it's about control. Control of tempo, of decision-making, and most importantly, of emotion. The silence Bird described isn't passivity, it's discipline. It's the ability to stay locked into the game regardless of what's happening around you. By redirecting her focus away from reactions and toward execution, Clark didn't just improve statistically, she changed how she influenced the game. Possessions became more deliberate, mistakes didn't spiral, pressure didn't dictate decisions. She began to operate on her own terms, which is exactly what Bird believed she was capable of from the start. In a league built on intensity and competition, that kind of composure stands out. And if Bird's message continues to shape her approach, it may end up being one of the defining factors in how far her career ultimately goes. Strategic awakening moment. To truly understand the impact of Bird's intervention, you have to go past the box score and get into the film. Before that pivotal meeting, Clark was playing under the immense pressure of the Caitlin Clark brand. She was forcing the logo 3 at suboptimal times, often trying to satisfy a crowd that had paid hundreds of dollars specifically to see her shoot from 30 feet. She was playing highlight reel basketball that made for incredible social media clips and viral moments, but led to a volatile assist-to-turnover ratio that plagued her early rookie months and gave critics all the ammunition they needed to argue she was not ready for the professional game. The numbers during that stretch told the story of a generational talent playing against herself. Turnovers were high, shot selection was inconsistent. The Fever's offensive system was built around Clark, but functioning like a one-woman show where the supporting cast stood and watched rather than moving with purpose. Then came the intervention. Bird reportedly sat with her, stripped the game down to its rawest possible form, and delivered the kind of basketball insight that only someone with his level of genius could articulate. Caitlin, you are the only person on the court who knows where everyone is, including the defenders, right now, in this second. You are playing their game by giving them the shots they expect. Stop playing their game and start making them play yours. That single piece of advice triggered a transformation that the film makes undeniable. The Bird-esque quality that people talk about when they compare Clark to the legend is not actually the scoring, it is the gravity. Bird was a master of manipulating defensive structure without even touching the basketball. And he would stand on the wing and draw two defenders simply because of the threat he represented, creating open looks for teammates who had done nothing to earn those shots other than playing alongside Larry Bird. Clark began to mirror this perfectly in the second half of her rookie season. She started moving the ball 2 seconds earlier than she had been.
Breaking news here on SportsCenter, and a surprise to absolutely nobody. Caitlin Clark has been named WNBA Rookie of the Year, the #1 overall pick.
Instead of holding it, surveying, and then forcing a contested shot because the defense had time to load up, she began hitting the hit-ahead pass or finding the corner shooter the instant the double team committed. She effectively neutralized the blitz that had been giving her problems for months. Defenses that used to swarm her at half court were suddenly terrified to leave their assignments because they knew she would find the open player before the rotation could recover. That strategic patience did not just improve her personal statistics, it unlocked the entire Indiana Fever roster in ways that transformed the team from a predictable, one-dimensional operation into a multi-layered offensive machine. The biggest beneficiary was Aaliyah Boston, with Clark drawing every eye on the defense and then immediately punishing overcommitment with elite entry passes that arrived at the exact spot Boston needed them. The lane opened up like it had never opened before. Boston's efficiency surged, her confidence grew, and the Fever suddenly looked like a team that could hurt you from 5 different places on the floor rather than just one. Bird saw in Clark a mirror image of his own greatest struggle as a young player, having a basketball IQ so impossibly high that it actually frustrates your own teammates. And in the 1980s, Bird used to throw passes to spots on the floor that his teammates had not even reached yet. The ball would arrive before the player did, and Bird would stand there staring at them, wondering why they had not read the play the way he had. He taught Caitlin the art of what he called the attainable pass, how to simplify the game for her supporting cast by putting the ball exactly where they needed it, at the speed they could handle, while keeping the full complexity of the game entirely inside her own head. She stopped playing against the opposing team and started playing with the fabric of the game itself, manipulating spacing, timing, and defensive attention the way a chess grandmaster manipulates pieces on a board. Seeing 5 moves ahead while making each individual move look simple enough that everyone else on the floor could execute their role without confusion. League-changing leadership. Bird's on-court coaching tips were fascinating enough on their own, but even more significant was his view on Clark's value to the sport as a whole. In a bombshell 2025 interview that sent shockwaves through WNBA front offices and sparked conversations at every level of women's basketball, Bird publicly argued that Caitlin Clark should not just be viewed as a player. She deserves, he said, the equity and status of her own franchise. That statement alone was explosive. But Bird did not stop there. But he addressed the treatment Clark had received from WNBA veterans during her first 2 seasons, with the kind of blunt honesty that only a living legend with nothing left to prove can deliver. He drew a direct line back to his own arrival in the NBA in 1979, a time when the league was on financial life support and veteran players resented the attention being given to a rookie from a small town nobody had heard of. When I came in, the veterans hated me too, Bird said with his signature dry wit and the kind of quiet confidence that made him terrifying on the court for 13 years. They didn't like the attention. They certainly didn't like a rookie taking the spotlight. But the smart ones, they eventually shut up. They realized I wasn't there to take their spot. I was the reason their paychecks were going to double. When Caitlin is that same rising tide, if you're fighting her, you're fighting your own bank account. That assessment cut through every narrative that had been built around Clark's rookie experience. The jealousy from veterans, the physical targeting, the backhanded praise from coaches like Gino Auriemma, the constant attempts to frame her success as manufactured hype rather than earned dominance. Bird saw through all of it and named it for what it was: self-destructive behavior from people who could not accept that the game had moved past them. This was the brutal truth Bird instilled in Clark during their private sessions. You are not just playing for the Indiana Fever. You are the CEO of this league's future. That framing was not just motivational language designed to make her feel important. It was a total psychological rebrand of how she understood her own position within the sport. Bird's mentorship helped Caitlin stop seeking the approval of the old guard entirely. She stopped trying to win over veterans who were never going to respect her until the balance of power forced them to. She stopped apologizing for the sold-out arenas and the record-breaking television deals and the merchandise numbers that dwarfed what any other player in the league was generating. Instead, she started using her fame as a psychological weapon, realizing that her gravity on the court, her ability to warp defensive schemes simply by existing on the floor, was just as powerful and just as valuable as her gravity off of it. The two forces fed each other. The bigger her cultural presence became, the more defenses feared her. The more defenses feared her, the more open looks she created for teammates. The more her teammates thrived, the more the Fever won. And the more the Fever won, the louder the conversation about Caitlin Clark became. Bird taught her to see that cycle not as pressure, but as leverage. And once she internalized that lesson, everything changed. The assassin in a Fever jersey, the transformation became undeniable during the 2025 postseason, when Caitlin Clark stepped onto the floor not as a promising rookie, but as a player in complete command of the moment. This was no longer the version of Clark fans saw early in 2024. Frustrated by physical defenses, reacting to whistles and occasionally forcing plays to meet the weight of expectation, what emerged instead was something far more calculated, composed, precise, dangerous. From the opening possessions of the playoffs, her tempo was deliberate, her decisions surgical. It wasn't just that she was playing well, it was the way she controlled everything around her. The pace of the game slowed or accelerated on her terms, and every possession seemed to unfold exactly as she intended. For the Indiana Fever, this shift changed everything. Clark stopped chasing moments and started creating them. Rather than settling for difficult shots early in the clock, she manipulated defenses, drawing them out, forcing switches, and exposing mismatches with patience that felt almost veteran-like. Her assist numbers reflected that evolution. In multiple playoff games, she flirted with double-digit assists, picking apart defensive schemes that had been specifically designed to limit her range. Hot teams that once pressured her full court began to hesitate, unsure whether they were playing into her hands. Observers began noticing something else too, a quiet edge that didn't rely on words. It echoed the mindset of Larry Bird, whose influence on Clark has been widely discussed. Bird was known not just for his skill, but for his psychological command of the game, his ability to anticipate, to dictate, and to break opponents mentally before the final buzzer. Clark began showing flashes of that same control. After hitting deep shots, she no longer celebrated wildly. Instead, she turned calmly, sometimes already retreating on defense before the ball dropped cleanly through the net. The message was subtle but unmistakable. This was expected. Now, one defining moment came in a late-game playoff scenario when Clark faced a double team near half court. Instead of forcing a contested shot, a decision she might have made earlier in her career, she waited, drew both defenders fully toward her, and delivered a perfectly timed pass to a cutting teammate for an easy basket. It was the kind of play that doesn't always make highlight reels but wins games. More importantly, it demonstrated her evolution from a scorer into a complete floor general. Her relationship with officiating also shifted. During the regular season, Clark had been vocal at times, clearly frustrated by physical play and inconsistent calls. a common adjustment for many rookies entering the WNBA. But in the postseason, that energy disappeared. She stopped reacting, stopped engaging, instead, or she redirected that focus into execution. It wasn't that the game became easier, it was that she became more efficient within it. Fouls, contact, missed calls, none of it seemed to disrupt her rhythm anymore. Statistically, the improvement backed up what fans were seeing. Her turnover rate dropped compared to early season numbers, while her assist-to-turnover ratio improved significantly. Her scoring remained elite, but it came within the flow of the offense rather than outside of it. She wasn't just producing, she was optimizing. Every possession became intentional. Every decision had purpose. By the later rounds of the playoffs, it was clear Clark wasn't simply playing basketball, she was orchestrating it. Teammates benefited from cleaner looks, better spacing, and a sense of confidence that came from knowing their leader was always one step ahead. Opposing defenses, meanwhile, looked increasingly uncertain. Adjustments that worked earlier in the season suddenly felt ineffective. Blitzing her open passing lanes. Dropping back gave her space to shoot. There was no obvious answer. This level of control is what many associate with the greatest players in basketball history, and it's why comparisons, fair or not, began to surface. Not because Clark plays exactly like Bird, but because she demonstrates something rarer: game state mastery. The ability to process not just what is happening, but what is about to happen. To see the floor not as it is, but as it will be seconds later. For viewers, this evolution made her playoff run compelling on a different level. It wasn't just about big shots anymore. It was about watching a player think the game in real time. Adjust, adapt, execute. The highlights were still there, but they were now part of a larger system of control. And that's what made this stretch so significant. It wasn't just a hot streak or a breakout performance. It was a clear shift in identity. Caitlin Clark had moved from reacting to the league to shaping it.
And Caitlin Clark pushing them.
And Clark played underneath that screen.
And Clark's feed to O'Grady is beautiful.
Everyone thinks they know Caitlin Clark. The deep threes, the highlight reel pull-ups, the arena-shaking shots. But Larry Bird saw something the world didn't: a fire beneath the surface, a mind built to dominate, and a quiet fury that refused to be contained. In one brutally honest conversation, Bird didn't just give advice, he rewired the way she approached the game, to turning a rookie drowning in the noise of fame into a player who controls every possession, weaponizes every expectation, and uses pressure as her advantage. This isn't about scoring points. This is about strategy, vision, and psychological mastery, the kind that turns a young star into a force the entire league has to reckon with. The old guard isn't ready for this. The WNBA isn't ready for this. But the future? The future is Caitlin Clark, and Larry Bird just lit the fuse.